Hello, everybody. Welcome to GB 2.0. I am so sorry we started late today. We will probably go a half hour long just to make it up to you. This is episode 5 of season 4. It is June 2nd of 2018. I am your host, Clare Wuellner, and joining me today are Tracie Harris and Jen Peeples, who is...
Hey, everybody.
She is literally phoning it in.
Yeah,
and these two lovely people are regular hosts on the Atheist Experience. GB 2.0 is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheist culture. I have a couple of announcements. First, every Sunday at 10 a.m. is the Sunday brunch at Cafe Express here in Austin on 35th and North Lamar. Every Sunday is 1 p.m. Talk Heathen at the ACA Free Thought Library, and 4:30 also at the ACA Free Thought Library is the Atheist Experience live broadcast. And then the after show also now at the ACA Free Thought Library. It's a great get-together. We have barbecue or some other sort of potluckish sort of thing, and people just socialize. It is really marvelous. So if you're in town, come by and see us, 6:30 p.m. on Sundays. But a very special announcement is on June 24th, that particular Sunday, will be the 1,000th episode of the Atheist Experience. And we will have Seth Andrews as a guest with Matt Dillhunty, so that will be a super special show. The other big announcement is, well, it's not a big announcement, but it's something that people should be aware of, is that there are lots of things going on in the atheist community, and not just with the Atheist Community of Austin. The ACA has a calendar on its website, and then there's also Center for Inquiry, and then there's the Secular Students Alliance on campus at UT, and lots of other things. If you go to meetup.com, you will find somebody somewhere who would be happy to get together with you. So, how are we, ladies?
Doing good. How are you?
yeah.
Good. I am feeling a lot better. Last month, if you're a person who's listened regularly, I mentioned that I am suffering from a concussion. The aftermath of that, I've found out since then, I think, that it's called post-concussion syndrome. And I'm getting better, but I'm counting on Jen and Tracie to rescue me if I start blathering or some such. Anywho, thanks for laughing at that.
No, I saw you at that last, the election meeting,
Yeah.
and you weren't looking too good.
No, it was post-concussion syndrome is, I didn't even know it existed until this happened to me, and it's frightening because you're like a prisoner in your own head. Your brain kind of defies you. It will not do what you want it to do, what it normally can do. You suddenly become aware of how much energy it takes to think. Things like listening to music or reading will give you a headache, and you literally have to sit every day, all day, for just being bored. You have to be bored, because if you're not bored, your brain will hurt, and it will tell you to stop it.
Wow.
It can take weeks, months, even more than a year to get over. I've spoken with a lot of people since I've been diagnosed with this, and there are people who really never fully recover. I sense that my trajectory is that I'll be fully recovered in the average of 3 months, and I'm about halfway there. So anyway, I still have to rest a lot after this. I'll probably go home and take a big, long nap, but I'm getting better.
Well, you're a rock star.
That means a lot coming from you, Jen. That means a hell of a lot.
No, really. I mean, I appreciate how much effort it takes for you, to do this show, because it takes preparation, it takes thinking about stuff, and I know that's very difficult after a concussion. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine in Germany sustained a concussion back when I was in the Army, mm-hmm. and she was riding a bike. She was training for like a long bike race, mm-hmm. and she literally woke up on the side of a road. Oh, after taking a spill on the bike. Mm-hmm. Her helmet was cracked. She had no idea. where she was for a little while, and then she kind of got herself together and got home. But yeah, it took her months, and she was not even sure she was ever going to come back up on flight status.
Wow.
She eventually did, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm glad she recovered, and here's to recovering. Yay.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. I have several things that I would like to talk to. There is so much going on in the news that is Godless Bitches worthy. Which thing do you want to cover first, ladies? I've got the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. I've got the bee versus bar thing. I've got a couple other things. I think bee versus bar to start with. What do you all think?
I have something to jump on right away here, because it is now Pride season.
Oh, yes, do that.
So,
do it.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
And in honor of Pride season, I have a Dear Straight People comment.
Okay.
Go.
Unfortunately, I have to put this out there every year, but Dear Straight People, please stop coming out as straight during Pride season.
Oh, Lord.
This is really not about you. So please don't usurp Pride for those of us for whom this is a very meaningful time. And for people who are confused about what Pride is all about, it's not Pride that we're gay or trans or bi or any of that other stuff. It's Pride that we survived. Mm-hmm. We have had to fight for rights that most people take for granted.
Yeah.
And we've secured those rights, even though they're still under threat right now. Mm-hmm. But it's really about the struggle and the fact that we survived. The fact that we are here and we can fly a rainbow flag is huge for us.
Right.
So please don't usurp that for us during this season.
Yeah. It's not about going down to the parade and watching the show.
Right.
There's a lot.
Speaking of the parade, though, Austin Pride is going to be August 11th. I don't know why they decide to have our Pride Festival when it feels like we're living on the surface of the sun.
Absolutely. I thought the same thing.
Right now, it's scheduled for August 11th. So.
All right. So we get to celebrate it twice a year.
Yeah.
Because it got all June, and then we get to play again in August. Although I wish the hell they had it in June here. Man, it's already hotter than hell.
It is. It was 99 yesterday.
Yeah, but it felt like 120. I thought I was going to melt. I'd go out for a second, and ugh. All righty. Right on. And for those who are fans of Callie Wright and Ari Stillman and E.J. Sorrell, they've been posting a lot of really, and if you're not, you should be. They've been posting a lot of really great stuff lately. They're all activists in LGBT plus stuff, and I have learned so much from them and really appreciate what they have to put out in the world. Okay, so now what? The bar...
Yeah.
Roseanne Barr.
I guess let's do it.
Samantha Bee. It's a biggie.
It's not pretty.
It is certainly not pretty. Okay.
Let's chat.
I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened, the long and short of it is that Roseanne Barr tweeted a racist tweet and ultimately was fired when a lot of her coworkers and other people got upset about it. Some people were going to walk from the show at the station itself, let her go, and then also called the person it was aimed at and said, I think it was Valerie Jarrett, I think that's her name, and they apologized to her personally. And then, not that long after, Samantha Bee got up and she used a gender slur, so she used a sexist slur, and then on the air, and she did apologize for it, and the station, I think, acknowledged that that it was not in good taste, and they ultimately said that was all they were going to do about it. And
she apologized.
Yeah, she did. And Roseanne offered all kinds of weirdness in response. I mean, there was like an apology mixed in with, it wasn't racist, I'm not a racist, even though it was completely racist. There was even the obligatory Islam is not a race. And I wanted to kind of address that just for a second, right? Because there are two things at work here. So on the one hand, you have a religion which is fair criticism, right? I mean, that is an ideology and a belief system that can be fairly criticized as a religion. And I don't have any problem with that. I'm clear on that. I'm okay with that. I have criticized it myself. I post things at the Facebook page that are critical of countries that are Islamic, that are doing Islamic things, the way they are treating women. I'm totally down with, yes, criticize that belief system, that ideology, that religion, just like you would any other. It is not protected. That being said, there are people who are racist who glom onto things that correlate strongly to particular groups of people that don't look like them. Normally, it would be a group that looks non-white, like a dark-skinned group of people like Arabs or Hispanics. And we had some legal cases in the past in the U.S. about this. So, for example, they had some legislation that was passed in the South basically saying that they wanted to impose poll taxes and literacy tests and these things to vote. You know, you can't vote unless you're literate. And in the meantime, you didn't have very good school systems for people that were not white in the southern U.S. And for those people, sometimes they were not literate, but they were also not integrated into the schools. And they were generally not making the kind of money that you were making if you were white. And so these laws, while technically they could affect anyone because anyone can be illiterate, they were aimed at reducing the voting population among non-whites. And this was absolutely clear, and it failed in court because they said, this isn't about literacy, it's about race. And so just because something isn't directly aimed at race, sometimes it just takes a dot or two to see where somebody is tying this to race and using it to be a racist. When you criticize somebody and say something about it's the Muslim Brotherhood, which I don't even think Jarrett has anything to do with the Muslim Brotherhood, so this was just aimed at her. Muslim Brotherhood, and then I think Planet of the Apes was the other thing she aimed at her. Turned out that Jarrett is a black woman, but Roseanne's defense was, I thought she was Iranian. Which, to me, doesn't make it any better. So, okay, so you're racist against people who are Arabic or Middle Eastern, and you used this, and she even said that it was like wrong to attack her for her looks. And I'm just like, okay, so you're admitting that you're saying she looks Muslim, right? I mean, you're acknowledging that you are tying how someone looks to this religion. This is not a religious critique. This was an attack about her appearance because she looks like a Muslim. And it was interesting because there were some stations that were like, oh, you know, she thought she was white. And it's like, no. To a racist, somebody from the Middle East is not white. And in fact, Indian people have been attacked, you know, Hindus have been attacked on the street for wearing turbans because people thought they were Muslims. So people tie this religion to racial appearance, to like genetic appearance, how people look physically, and they use that as a mechanism to exercise racism against people. Now, definitely that is not what everybody does, but there are people that do it, and there's a lot of people that do it. And this is what she was doing. The comment was racist, and it was racist on that level. The other thing was, anyway, there's getting back to it. She made this racist comment. B made a sexist slur. She aimed a sexist slur at Ivanka Trump. And as far as the thing I think that bothered me isn't necessarily that there were different levels of response to it, because I'd like to go through a little bit and talk about how they were the same and how they were different. Because there are some differences and there are some similarities between the situations and the comments themselves. Definitely, the sexist slur is a slur on all women. When you aim a slur at an individual, you are not just attacking that individual, but you are attacking a disempowered, disenfranchised group that has a minority status. And in the case of women, even though they make up sometimes, 50% of the population or more, they are still in a minority status as far as like their disempowerment, their disenfranchisement from, positions of power. And so you have this situation where both people attacked disenfranchised, disempowered groups using language that is meant to denigrate those groups of people. And on that level, they were exactly the same. Now, I saw some people posting, and it was very, very frustrating to me to see comparisons. So it was like this, it's this slur against women is not as bad as this slur against blacks, right? Or Iranians, depending on who you think you're insulting. And I'm looking at it, and I think I posted on one of the feeds, and I said, to me, this is like asking how much assault is acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't really care if somebody broke somebody's nose or busted both their legs. I'm not going to sit there and turn it into a pissing contest and tell a person, you got no right to bitch about your broken nose because somebody else had both their legs broken. No, they both have a right to complain. Mm-hmm. They both have a right to demand that they not get their nose broken. I don't care if you can rank it. Yeah, somebody who's beaten to death has got it worse than somebody who is beaten into a coma, has got it worse than somebody who had their arm broken, has got it worse than somebody that was slapped in the face. But all of those people have a right to say, I shouldn't have been assaulted at all. Mm-hmm. And so when we're looking at a gender slur and a racist slur, I'm not getting into a pissing contest about which group has it worse. Because when you're talking about people being denied basic rights and basic freedoms, when women do not own their own bodies, when people who can become pregnant do not own their own bodies, and then you have other people who are struggling to not be shot in the street, to sit there and say, let's pit them against each other, let's see who's got it worse, to me is absolute ignorance. Mm-hmm. Both groups have a problem that has to be resolved. They are both disenfranchised and both disempowered, and they both need support, and they both should be protected against slurs. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, when you're slurring those groups, you're basically feeding into the social mechanism that keeps them viewed as less. Mm-hmm. Because you are making this kind of nasty label, applying it to them, and then saying, well, this is okay because this group doesn't have it as bad as this other group.
Isn't there a logical fallacy? I can't think of it. There's a word for this when you have this pissing contest. It's a distraction from the actual problem.
To me, I don't know, but it reminds me. It reminds me a lot of when they talk about genital mutilation or genital alteration of children for custom, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I look at that, and it's just there are people that get into it about who's got it worse, and I'm like, what? How much genital mutilation or genital alteration of children that is unnecessary is acceptable? Mm-hmm. None. Mm-hmm. So instead of getting into a combative fight between which group that's being disrespected and whose bodily autonomy is being violated, who's being worse off, to me is an irrelevant question. The battle needs to be, we need to stop doing this to all children. And this is the same with me. I think that it's really looking in the wrong direction, being combative and pitting these groups against each other when you start trying to say this group doesn't have it so bad that we can't insult them and slur them and treat them like crap. I think it's fair to say that neither group should be slurred. And part of the reason that slurs are a problem is because of the social context of the history of disempowerment. And this is why different language is applied to different groups. And one of the things that I was thinking of was the comment that was so vile that came out, caused a kerfluffle a little while ago, where somebody had made the comment to someone else that I wouldn't even rape you.
No, yeah.
And the first thing I thought was, would you say to somebody who is black, I wouldn't even lynch you? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if someone came up to me as a woman and said, I wouldn't even lynch you, I would just be confused by that comment. Mm-hmm. I would be like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. Who lynches anybody, right? Mm-hmm. But if you come up to somebody that's black and you say, I wouldn't even lynch you, that carries with it the weight of hundreds of years of oppression. Mm-hmm. It is a symbol of that oppression. And so that's why you don't say that to the person, right? Because you're basically using the history. I'm sorry, I'm dominating this, but it's like I want to kind of get through these talking points. You're talking about the history of dominating these people, oppressing these people, ways in which they were tortured, killed, mistreated, denied rights, and abused for so long. And you don't take that as a person of privilege and weaponize it against that group in this day and age. If you're going to use their oppression against them, right, basically say you were oppressed and let me throw that in your face as my response to you, then you're part of the problem, right? You're part of what keeps racism going. You're part of what keeps sexism going. You're contributing to this. And that harm is what makes this wrong. And so you have this issue where there are people, and kind of like what Jen was talking about earlier, right? White people don't need to come out on pride, right? That's just, it's almost like an in-your-face asshole thing to do. To say, well, if you can come out because you're gay and be prideful, I can come out and I'm not gay and I'm prideful. You're missing the point that there's a history of oppression with this group that does not belong to you. You don't have that oppression. You've never had that oppression. You've had the privilege to go through life as a normal human being with never having your sexual orientation questioned. If you're not trans, you've never had your gender identity questioned. I mean, well, I guess there's some people that probably have, that fall into categories where maybe they aren't the social accepted construct of what they should look like or how they should behave, and that they might be questioned. So yes, you've got people on the fringe, even that identify with what we would say, they were labeled at birth. That would still be questioned. But in general, you're going through life and nobody is giving you a hassle. Nobody's stripping your rights. Nobody's oppressing you because of your sexual orientation.
It's a non-issue.
Right. And so the idea of somebody basically saying, well, there's this, slur against white people, and why is that okay? It's not that it's okay. It's impolite, okay? It's an impolite thing, and I'll give you it's impolite, but it doesn't call up
have an impact.
2,000 years or 200 years of vile, right-stripping oppression that somebody's putting in your face in order to just torment you with that again. And so if we lived in an egalitarian society where there wasn't any of this crap in our history and there wasn't any of this crap going on now, like you're talking about Kaepernick, it's still going on. Oh, yeah. All you have to do is look at it. So when you've got this stuff going on and when you have this stuff in the history, and then you don't have that opportunity to freely sort of throw this stuff around. Now, when I took anthropology, there are societies where there's a lot of egalitarianism, where you don't have racism because they're too small, they don't have other races. And you have a situation where the men and women are, nobody's really questioning whether you have a right to do things and whatever. It's like people are pretty free. And in those societies, they do joke about, gender, and they do make jokes about, insult each other with gender jokes, but it goes all around in both ways, and nobody has a history of oppressing somebody else, and so it's just good fun. Right. We don't have that. We have it sometimes if you have a group of friends that are all kind of open-minded, people know you're being ironic, you're being teasing, and you guys are, open and level enough to understand that this is within us, and I know your attitudes enough to know that this is not meant to be hurtful, this is not meant to be vile, we joke this way. But that is not our broader society. And just because it's okay with your buddy doesn't mean it's okay with everybody that doesn't know you, doesn't know your attitudes, doesn't know where you stand on these issues. So we've got this huge thing going on. And when it comes to these slurs, no, it's not okay to slur any group, especially an oppressed group. If you want to say that it's not okay to slur even a non-oppressed group, yeah, it's impolite. But it doesn't carry the weight. Right. And so you've got this situation where you've got these two slurs. Both are against groups that are struggling for equality. So this isn't a matter of one group was privileged and the slur was aimed at them. Neither group here is privileged. We can sit here and argue all day about who's worse off. But the point is, both these groups have issues with equality in this society. And so those slurs, in my opinion, should not have been leveled by either person. That being said, that's kind of my thinking on this issue and how I come to the conclusion that I think they were both wrong.
I'm with you so far.
Now, with Samantha Bee, it was a one-time thing. She doesn't have a history of sexist slurs. With Roseanne, it wasn't a one-time thing. She has a history of racist stuff. In a business, if somebody makes a mistake, even sometimes an egregious mistake, if you know that in general the person is working hard, trying to do the right thing, tries to have business ethics, tries to do good, even if they do something really wrong, it doesn't mean you necessarily fire them. Sometimes you call them in and you say, we really need to talk. And maybe there's going to be some punitive action taken against you for what happened. And you need to understand what went wrong and why, because this can't happen again. The problem with that is that the station that airs the show that Samantha Bee is on chose to air it. This was not on Twitter. Roseanne went off on her Twitter feed. Bee did it on a show that was taped and then aired, and that this was approved to go forward by the same station who people are now saying, should you fire her? So I get that, so that's another difference. So number one, Bee doesn't have this history of acting this way. Number two, though, the station approved this. So there was a whole bunch of people that didn't see the problem with it until it came out and people were like, what in the world is this? Then I think that to me is kind of the thing. So there's on the one hand, I think it's worse that it went out on the air. It would be like if they let Roseanne make that joke on the show.
I also think it would have gone completely under the radar had it not occurred in the shadow of the bar thing.
I don't know if
I don't think it would have been
I think what made it big is that she aimed it at Ivanka Trump. I think that would have made it big either way, because I don't think that Trump would have let that slide. It's going to go out on his Twitter feed. It's going to be a thing, and as soon as it goes out on his Twitter feed, it's going to be covered by all the main stations. That would have made it a thing. And when I saw it, it's like on the one hand, I saw what I saw on a not necessarily on a station level. I think the station made a mistake. And I think it would be somewhat hypocritical for the station to fire her when they approved it to go on the air. Mm-hmm. But I think that they have to acknowledge that it was a mistake, and they have. And with Barr, she did this on her personal dime, but when you have people that have to work with you and they're basically saying no one's going to work with you, the station has to make a decision, right? Like, are we going to deal with this racist person who is now going to start causing a problem for us and our bottom line? And they decided not to do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not here advocating that the responses need to be the same, or even that people need to adopt the idea that, they have to look at this the same way or whatever. I think there's similarities. I think there's differences. But I think that the wrong response is somebody trying to say that one is somehow better than the other, instead of just simply saying each situation is unique. They both made mistakes, and, based on certain things, maybe one should have been fired and one might not have been fired. Just like if you had an employee that was constantly making mistakes and you were finally just like, look, I can't take this. Mm-hmm. This has got to end. And you've got somebody that messes up that you have faith that going forward, or trust that going forward based on their record, they can do better. Mm-hmm. And if you have that, sometimes it's okay to keep somebody employed. It's not just about outrage, right? Sometimes it really is about, does the person understand what they did? There have been people in the past who have made mistakes that have come forward and issued real apologies, not non-apologies, but said, look, I messed up. I said this thing. I think there was a situation, I don't remember exactly what it was Benedict Cumberbatch had said something and people called him out. Mm-hmm. And immediately he came out and said, I am 100% wrong. I said this thing. It was the wrong thing to say. I should have been more careful. I need to think more about this and how I express it, and about my understanding of, and I need to be more careful.
Period.
Yeah.
No justification. Yeah. No ongoing Twitter battles over how she's not blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And I think I'm done with my rant here. So, but that was kind of everything I wanted to get out.
All right. Good.
Yeah. So that's actually an important point, because the unequivocal apology with no excuses is exactly what Samantha Bee did.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. She tweeted an apology that said, I would like to sincerely apologize to Ivanka Trump and to my viewers for using an expletive on my show to describe her last night. It was inappropriate and inexcusable. I crossed the line and I deeply regret it. There was no excuse about I was on Ambien when I did it. Or
I don't really use sexist slurs or, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
no attempt to shift the blame.
It
to
wasn't
the
a
producers
sexist slur.
She just apologized.
I thought that Ivanka Trump was a man.
Yeah.
There was nothing like that. And I mean, so there's definitely differences. I'm not blind. I'm not saying like, oh, this is, exactly the same situation, exactly the same scenario, exactly the same personality. I mean, I get there's differences. But I think that it's kind of ignorant to ignore the similarities.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me as disingenuous is that Roseanne Barr makes a mistake. She's fired. There's upset over it. Samantha Bee makes a mistake, and those same people are just on fire for her being fired. She should be taken down. And that's disingenuous, because if they were saying Samantha Bee wasn't fired, Roseanne Barr should really get her job back, then it would really be about what's fair. Because if the same people who think that are cool with Trump being who he is.
And the other thing, I think it kind of is an interesting segue into your Kaepernick story, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically what happened is the NFL has come out and they decided that they're going to put a kibosh on whether or not you can kneel during the anthem. You can go stay in the back of the bus.
Jesus,
and let the rest of us have our stand for the anthem, and then you can all come out from the back and just, as long as we don't need this kerfluffle about, black people being unjustly killed by our system. Y'all need to just kind of cool that off, because we have racist fans that are offended by this, and we're losing our bottom line. Now, this is, again, just a big heap of similarities and differences, right? Because you've got a situation where each of these people has a private employer. Each of those employers does have the right to deal with the situation in the way that they see fit. And what I'm finding that's interesting is that there are a lot of people that are trying to confuse this with free speech and make this equivocable, right? So they're basically saying, if you are mad at the NFL for finding the players, but then you're okay with Roseanne Barr being fired and you don't want Samantha Bee to be fired, you are completely inconsistent, because if you're for free speech, then all these people should keep their jobs and there shouldn't be any fines. And it's like, no, you're confusing the issue here. This has nothing to do with free speech. These are private employers. This has to do with whether or not you want to support a private employer with your wallet that is pro-racism, that is also pro-racism, depending on Kaepernick's. The NFL is behaving in a pro-racist way. I think it was it ABC that had Roseanne? I don't want to name the wrong network, but they chose anti-racism. And then you had Bee, and I don't know what network she's on, but she made a sexist slur, right? And with Kaepernick, the issue isn't about free speech. It's about, and somebody called me out and they were just like, what are you, dense? This isn't about pro-racism. This is about they were losing money because, people weren't buying tickets. And so that's all this was about. And I said, I don't really care why they're pro-racism. Right?
It just is what it is.
If I'm going to say I'm pro-racism because it's lucrative, I'm still pro-racism, right? I mean, I don't care what their ideology is. When you're supporting racists and you're siding with racists and you are making decisions based on what racists want you to do, and then you want to say, I'm not pro-racist, that's ridiculous. I don't care if you personally care if you personally don't give a crap what color somebody is. If you are willing to do what racists want you to do and support racists, that's pro-racism. Telling me that, well, it's not really because I'm personally racist. Like, if there weren't racists paying me, then I wouldn't do this thing to support racist perspectives. Well, but you are supporting racist perspectives. You're on the side of racism. You're on the side of wrong here. And yes, it could be because of your bottom line, but the fact is you're still choosing racism. And these are not patriots. These are racists holding flags in front of their swastikas and their, KKK hoods. They're out there pretending that they're offended about a flag or an anthem, but really what this is all about. Flag, this is all about, they don't want a person of color, a black person, to
muddy their
to protest.
little. Yeah.
I don't want to see your protest. I want you to go in the back where you can't be seen, can't be heard, and you can go and protest there.
Well, and this idea that kneeling for the anthem is somehow an affront to the military,
right,
is particularly that's particularly, I guess, distasteful for me, because that CAP's protest was never about the military. You know, it absolutely had nothing at all to do with the military. That was something that some racists injected into this to divert attention from the fact that the protest was specifically about Black people being killed in what amounts to extrajudicial executions by police.
Yeah.
You know, it had nothing at all to do with the military. And I really resent people using the military as props for whatever, you know, bullshit ideology they're promoting. And it's usually some form of nationalism, which I think is very distasteful. But, I mean, you know, I spent 26 years in the Army. I am not at all offended by people who kneel for the national anthem. In fact, I think that for people that, you know, maybe you already have your season tickets to your favorite NFL team, or you don't want to boycott the NFL over this or whatever, I would encourage people that if you find yourself at an NFL game, when they start the national anthem, since the players can't kneel, you kneel.
Yeah.
Kneel in support of the players who can't do that.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, if I was a sports ball fan, I would definitely do that, but...
Yeah.
And that's the thing, too, though. It's like the people that are critical of Kaepernick are basically ignoring the explanation for what this is about. They don't ever talk about... It's never they never open their mouths and talk about Black Lives Matter. And I'm pretty sure if they did, they would say that they don't believe it anyway. Right? This is the crowd who is like, oh, Black people aren't being killed. They're just pulling up, you know, just showing the videos of Black people getting killed. And it's like, well, let's not look at the statistics about how much harsher our justice system is all across the board to people who are non-white that go before a judge, that stand there and talk to a cop. I mean, there's been stuff that has been happening to people that are Black that's been in the news that I'm just like, when does this ever happen, right? Like, never. If you're white, this never happens. And I heard a really funny quip on... I think it was on Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR show.
I love that.
And somebody said something about Starbucks now is going to have a new policy where you can come in and use the bathroom and you don't have to buy anything. They're just basically telling the stores, let people go and use the bathroom. They do not have to make a purchase. And the guy that's on the show goes, actually, that's always been their policy, as long as you're white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yep, it's true.
Yep. Oh, before I forget, the fallacy name that you were looking for here is called the fallacy of relative privation.
Thank you. Thank you. Because damn near every sentence coming out of y'all's mouths while you were talking, I was thinking that, what is that damn fallacy? Because you're saying it again and again with everything you've said about the Kaepernick. Kaepernick. Thank you.
Kaepernick.
Them saying, anybody saying that. Oh, well, what about black on black crime and all these other things that are just like, whoa, back it up. That's got nothing to do with anything. You're missing the point, and you will never see the point because you don't want to see the point.
That's the thing. They don't want to because it's been explained. It's been clearly explained. There's been interviews, pages and pages and, you know, voluminous interviews with explaining the purpose of this. And if you still don't get it, you don't want to get it. You haven't looked at it. You don't care.
Yeah. And I don't know about listeners or either of you two here on the show with me, but I've got friends who could stand to be a little more educated, friends and relatives, and I do speak up. When they give me pushback, the thing that seems to make them think the most is that when you look at every single way you can measure a parameter about how a demographic is treated, and in every single one of those studies, you see a difference in how they're treated.
Yeah.
Something is systemically wrong.
Right.
You can't ignore the data, period.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I think at the level of the police departments, it becomes, what's the word I'm looking for? Like more weaponized, right? Because, I mean, these are people with the right to use lethal force. But I also think that what we see expressed in the police departments is basically the overall social prejudice that exists anyway. It's just that these people are in a position of of using lethal force, so that it turns out to be a more weaponized version of racism than what you're going to see just, from a sales clerk, for example. I mean, the sales clerk, I think we even had one recently where the two guys were like accused of shoplifting or something. Like they're black and they were just like, we're being tailed all around this, and they didn't do anything wrong, of course. But when that happens, nobody gets killed, right? There's no bloodshed. No. When a clerk, is racist enough to think, well, they're black, so they're going to steal something, and so you just don't have the deadly result. But I don't think that I mean, I have seen some things that talk about like potentially higher levels of racism in, authoritarian positions. And it's not that I would say that that can't be possible, or that maybe there isn't some good research out there to indicate that that's the case. But I think that overall, there's probably a pretty good level of racism in the society that, this is just a manifestation at a level where people are working with guns. And that's why it becomes like far more dangerous. It's more dangerous racism when you have decisions to make that are life and death.
And these are people who are supposed to be protecting. And I have friends whose spouses are police officers, and I see all of the Blue Lives Matter stuff, and we know that they risk their lives every day when they go to work. We get it. But so do lots of other jobs. And your average fireman, although there was that recent article or thing about a white EMT who saw that there was a black person who had been killed or injured on the road in front of him, and tweeted that he intentionally did not do anything because the person was black. So there is a way you can have an impact without having a gun. But I think by and large, the impact they can have. And I've also read lots of statistics about other jobs that are far more likely, the participants are far more likely to die than being a cop. And one of them is a Quickie Mart teller. Those people die at a higher rate than cops do.
I mean, I would say it's probably an unusual day for a cop when he even has to pull a service weapon.
Right.
I mean, I think it's just the potential for it. I do respect the fact, of anybody coming forward to say we'll work for the community in order to preserve safety and, whatever. And when that's not working correctly, I think the community has a obligation to address the issue and to make sure that it gets put back on track. Yeah. So I think, as a community, or as communities, because these are local level employees, we have a responsibility to make sure that our employees are following our policies, and make sure that our policies are, include some sort of training and awareness about racism and about, like I have to go through that training in my job, and I'm just sitting at a desk all day, but I have to go through sensitivity training and whatnot. And so I think that, it's fair for us to say, well, if we have this problem within our police departments, we need to raise some awareness at the police departments. We need to make sure that people understand that this is not tolerated, that if you have these attitudes, you had better check them at the door when you come into work. Because,
that's actually a really good point, because one of the things that I've seen so often when these cases come up where, a minority has been killed and it turns out that they weren't doing anything wrong, like the guy that recently got shot in his grandmother's backyard. He was holding a cell phone, and over and over again we hear that, well, the police didn't violate any procedures. And for me, that screams big red flag here, because if your procedures allow you to shoot someone unarmed standing in a relative's backyard, there's something seriously fucked up about your procedures.
Right. And that's a community issue, right? I mean, we are the ones that are ultimately responsible for those procedures. And so when that happens, I'm with you. That's the point where everybody has to get on the phone to the mayor and say, what in the heck is going on with the chief of police and the police department here? Because if this is our policy, so don't you think something's wrong with this, Mr. Mayor? Right.
And that's the thing. It's like, this is the kind of systemic issue that, you can prosecute individuals for these extrajudicial executions till the cows come home. But it doesn't really address the root cause of the problem. And the root cause is that there is this systemic, issue within certain police departments that allows this kind of behavior. That it's not even that it allows it, it's that it almost is designed to create this kind of response.
It's
this exaggerated fear response.
Yeah, let's say it's foster.
You know, and we have to stop seeing each other as the enemy.
Yeah.
You know, when the police show up and they automatically see someone, you know, especially if that person's skin is brown, as the enemy, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's what falling back on, oh, well, they were following procedure. That doesn't address the problem.
No.
Maybe the procedure is the problem.
Yeah, you might need to step back and look at that a little more closely. Something that an area in which my awareness has been raised recently. Somebody I follow on Facebook was talking about being stalked or somehow being treated in a very bad way, and this person is trans, and people were saying, well, call the cops. And he's like, no, you can't. And I thought, wow, I live in such a different world. For me, calling a cop means I'm going to get some help.
Yeah, absolutely,
Wow, this person is being threatened and can't get help from the people who are supposed to help. And I know
I can tell you,
go on.
I was going to say, I actually had a stalker situation many years ago.
Boy, were they freaking stupid. What were they looking to get chopped?
Well,
I know, I'm just being silly.
Yeah, there were like a number of issues here. So this person was an erotomanic stalker, which is a very dangerous and difficult kind of situation.
Yeah.
And the stalker was a woman, which if your stalker is a woman,
they're not going to take you seriously.
Trust me, when you go to the police, they don't take it seriously.
Right.
Even when you start describing behavior that, would raise the hackles on anyone, and you have recordings of voicemail messages and conversations where this person has said some bizarre things, it was really kind of creepy and very scary.
Yeah.
And you can't do anything. And the thing is, you go in and people say, "Oh, get a restraining order," as if that's actually going to do anything for you.
Right. Yeah.
A restraining order is a piece of paper.
Yeah, it doesn't. Right.
And when if your stalker shows up at your door to do you bodily harm, that piece of paper isn't going to help you. And I say that when they show up at your door to do you bodily harm, because when you go to get the restraining order, you have to tell the person to go, which means giving up your home address. So if they didn't already have that, then they'll have it after you get a restraining order.
Yeah, and wouldn't that mean you'd also have to put like any place you would frequent, like your workplace and all of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're telling this person, here's where you can find me during the day, here's where I reside at night, here,
And I'm thinking stalkers generally aren't big rule followers anyway.
No, they're not.
If you tell them don't do that, they're going to, whatever.
Well, that's the thing. If you're dealing with a reasonable person and you tell them, hey, I don't want to have anything to do with you, stay away from me. Most people who are reasonable say, okay, hey, sorry I bothered you, and they back off. But stalkers, by definition, are not reasonable people. So, when you tell them, hey, don't go here, here, and here, they take that as please don't throw me in that briar patch.
Yeah.
And that's where they
it's a personal challenge.
Yeah.
No, it's like, I'm making light here, but it's not a light situation. These are people that do not see other people like people, right? They do not respect and regard other human agency. And that's the root cause of every problem with people, is when you don't regard the other person's agency and autonomy and allow them to make the decisions that they want to make in their life, even if that means I don't want to include you in my life. Just respect it. It's all it takes. All you have to do at that point is leave them alone.
Yep.
This segues into something else I had on the GB page, which was, I guess it was a U.S. border guard on the Canada border, I think it was, where he saw a couple of women speaking Spanish and approached them and asked for identification. They put it on, they videotaped it on their phones. And they asked why they were being asked for papers, and he was just like, I heard you speaking Spanish, and the woman's got it on tape, and she's like, are you racially profiling me? Yeah. And the guy is like, no, I heard you speaking Spanish, and and I'm like, I don't think this person knows what racial profiling is, right? This is the whole thing with, I saw that you were illiterate, and so I wanted to make sure you had the right to vote because you can't be illiterate and vote, right? I mean, this is that thing again. It's like he's correlating the language to a race, and then his red flag goes up because that's a race that we don't trust, and they're probably illegals. And it's like, this is what Hispanic people in this country have to deal with right now. And the children, right? Those kids get stripped away at the border. Like, if you're not aware of that, you need to look it up, because it's horrendous what's happening right now. These are people that come to the U.S. Some of them have come here legally seeking asylum. And their children are being taken to places where, I mean, I saw some photos yesterday, and I was just like, this is not acceptable. This is not like an acceptable way to house children.
It's inhuman. I don't know how you find somebody who's willing to do that job every day. I can't fathom taking someone's child from them and then doing,
and then warehousing them.
Yeah.
How do you justify that to yourself? I mean, just at a very personal level, not to mention the societal wrong of it. I can't imagine the trauma for the families.
It's beyond real that we're doing this to people in the United States.
It boggles my mind. Go on, Jen.
The idea that there are children in this country who spend their night essentially in a dog cage. It's like, excuse me, this is the United States. We don't warehouse children in dog cages away from their parents. I mean, that is such a nightmare scenario. I can't even imagine what I would do if someone tried to do that to my child. Separated me from my child and put my child somewhere where I didn't know where he was, who was taking care of him, what his emotional state was or anything. I cannot even imagine. I mean, I would be homicidal if someone did that to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't even. My heart just breaks.
I mean, this reminds me of something that I was thinking about actually shortly after 9/11 took place. Mm-hmm. And everybody was kind of in a panic about what do we do? And, something that we had taken for granted for years was suddenly under attack. This idea that you could show up, 10 minutes prior to gate time to catch a flight. And I used to do this all the time, show up at the very last minute because I could breeze through security and just walk onto the plane. And basically they were closing the door behind me because that's how I got to work, Mm-hmm. I was flying to the West Coast frequently. Anyway, so suddenly that was no longer the situation and people were kind of reeling. And then I thought to myself, if you really wanted to really disrupt this country, you would basically destroy people's confidence in, fire, police, first responders. Because then people wouldn't call the police and, people wouldn't trust if they got pulled over or something like that. People wouldn't trust that that's an actual police officer, and it wouldn't take more than a few incidents to basically erode public trust in that institution. Mm-hmm. And recently I started thinking about this and I was thinking, that's exactly what's happened with the Black community. And the fact that they're actually still participating in society I think it's a testament to the character of the individuals here that they still are invested in this country.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And the same thing with Hispanic people, because if you're in fear of, if you get pulled over for a routine traffic stop, that the cop is going to suddenly go all ice on you and demand to see your papers and stuff. I mean, what do you do?
Well, I think what you're describing here is like an erosion of the social contract, right? So
Yes,
there's a social contract in
absolutely.
place, and it's only valid insofar as both sides are meeting their obligations. And this is going to sound really, really ridiculous, but I was watching The Jungle Book last night. I'd never seen the movie, and it was on, and I was like, oh, let me check it out. And there was one little, the animals all had these little sayings and, you know, creeds or whatever, and the wolves said, the strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf. And that's the social contract in a nutshell, right? So you've got the individuals that make up the society, and that creates the society. And then you've got the society, the collective, that protects the individual. And that is your basic social contract. And everybody is there because they agree to be there. And everybody can leave when they want to leave. And what happens is, as the society starts to break down, as the group starts to less and less protect some individuals, like what Jen is describing, what you're describing is those individuals become less loyal to the group, understandably, because they're not getting their share. As the society starts to squeeze you out little by little, deny you the same opportunities, deny you the same protections, if you're not getting protected and you're not being treated as part of the pack, what is your incentive to contribute as the wolf? You don't have any incentive, right? Your incentive starts to get less and less. And what you're saying is, when you reach a point where the pack is just like, you can die and I don't care, why should that person participate anymore? Why should they be loyal to the establishment? And the thing that's really painful is that in our own society, even though technically you can leave, if you're in poverty, you know, or you're not doing well, or you're striving to just like put food on your table, make your rent, you're living paycheck to paycheck, or maybe even not doing that well, going into debt, how the hell are you going to get out of here and go like live in Ireland, or go live in the UK, or I'm going to go, you know, move to Canada? These are not people with that kind of lucrative capacity for opportunity. It's ridiculous to say that they can actually leave. So they're stuck in a situation where they're being treated worse and worse. And then when they throw a rock, they're as bad as the KKK, right? They're as violent and nasty as those people that marched in Charlottesville with sidearms and torches and shouted down, you know, Jews and blacks on the streets. And, you know, you're just as bad as that. And it's like, no, because those people marching with torches and sidearms, they don't have any reason to be pissed at the society. The society is totally embracing them. You know, they're in a situation where they have the opportunities. They're not being, you know, forced into situations that are untenable and told they can't leave. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that those are equivalencies, even when it turns violent, because frankly, when your society turns against you and you haven't done anything wrong, that's actually when violence is recommended, right? I mean, if we look at our own Declaration of Independence, when you read the Declaration of Independence, it's almost like it was written yesterday sometimes. If you go and read that, I encourage people to go read that document. It holds no legal weight, but what it is an understanding that when the government starts oppressing you to a particular point where it is just untenable any longer, you can no longer shoulder that burden. Because people are so long-suffering, I think it has a line that says that, right? Because people, I forget how it words it, but it's like people are inclined to basically put up with abuse, that they will put up with abuse. And so at the point that you actually say, I'm going to throw a rock, you're pretty badly abused. And if you're denied due process, what mechanism do you have, right? How do you go about adjusting this in a legal, peaceful way when you are not allowed the same due process as everybody else in your society?
People don't even support your desire to kneel.
Yeah, basically people are saying, your society's response is, we don't want to see you telling us about, we don't want you even raising awareness about your issue.
That's pretty ugly. Oh my God. Are we ready to move on to another thing?
Sure.
I have one that's...
I do have one thing that kind of ties in, just real quickly.
Okay.
There was a little release of information, I guess here, like some sort of Christianity Today posted it, but it was also posted in other locations, that white evangelicals are the most likely to say the U.S. should not welcome refugees.
They've got theirs. They're cool.
Yeah. God and racism, like peanut butter and jelly.
Only less tasty.
Yeah.
Oh, God almighty. Okay, so we get mail from time to time here at Godless Bitches, and we got one recently that I thought warranted discussion on the actual show. By the way, if you do email us, we do read them all. We are unlikely to respond at this point because we still haven't figured out some things about the email, but that's a little embarrassing, but it's true. Anyhow, the person says the subject is objectification question. I'd be interested in your view on something, and please pardon my English as it is not my native language. You have talked at length in one of your previous episodes about the problems of objectification, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And I understand you are all very sex positive and see no issue with masturbation. But I get some cognitive dissonance when I try to square these views. I don't know how other people do it, but in my personal practice of masturbation, I have to use mental images of one or more sexual partners, play movies in my mind. It just doesn't work otherwise. And quite inevitably, most of the other people in these mental movies are actual people, typically celebrities. And from the discussions you had, this is pretty much the definition of objectification. Now, if I may hypothesize that I am not the only one to operate this way, then I have a hard time squaring the positive aspect of masturbation and the negative aspect of objectification. If I may add, pretty much since I started masturbating, something about it felt wrong. I didn't have the concept of objectification back then, and it felt to me that using mental images of unconsenting people for masturbation was kind of a lighter form of rape. Just because they don't know about it doesn't mean it's not wrong. After some time, I solved the problem by separating, quote, real people, unquote, classmates, for instance, from celebrities, considering that the former didn't consent to what I was doing, whereas the latter somewhat implicitly did by making themselves available for masturbation by consenting to sexy photo shoots, etc., and decided to, quote, use, unquote, only them. But now that I think about it, due to your conversations about objectification, it doesn't seem that great of a solution. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Thanks for a great show.
I don't think that he's involving real people, so it doesn't, I don't really see, objectification I understand that he's envisioning people who exist, but it's not like he has somebody chained in his basement that, I hope not. Like what he's describing is not the idea of like chaining somebody up in your basement and going down there and masturbating in front of them. And it's not even, I'm looking in my neighbor's window and masturbating to the person through the window. This is not actually involving them. It's not just that they don't, quote, know about it. It's that they are actually not involved. Like you're not even making them participate in really being there, right? Like I've had people, a friend of mine and I were driving years ago back from the nightclubs, and there was a guy that was like kind of driving erratically. And the roads were pretty empty because it was late. And he was driving kind of erratically and speeding up and kind of getting near us. We were afraid he was kind of drunk. We were just like, this guy's going to cause an accident. He pulls up right next to us. And we looked over to see, like, what is this person doing? And he's like sitting up in his seat, like almost standing in the driver's seat, masturbating while he's trying to drive, trying to see us in the cars. Now that's objectification. Right? It's not just sexualization. And sexualization and objectification are not the same thing. So if, let's say, for example, this same guy saw me at the club that night, went home later, and then masturbated thinking, man, that was a hot-looking person that I saw at the club, if I can, like, flatter myself.
Be so vain.
Yeah. Well, let's just say anyone, right? Like, you see anybody at the club.
Nope.
Now.
That's good.
Don't send me a photo of yourself masturbating, say that I was thinking of you, right? Because that's objectification. That's completely disregarding my autonomy. You're not thinking about whether or not I want to know this, whether or not I want to be participant. You're involving me at that point, not just your mental image of something you thought was attractive. You're actually involving me. And that's why I get a kind of frustrated with people that come forward sometimes and they'll say something to you. When people make a comment about your appearance or whatever, they're bringing that to you. right? They're not, it's fine to think whatever you want to think about somebody's appearance, think it all you want. But when you bring it to them, the question is, why in the world are you bringing it to them, right? Be clear on why you're doing that. Because now you're involving them in this weird individual assessment of how they look or what they're wearing or whatever. And is there a reason to involve them that you think they would want to participate in? And based on your knowledge of them, not on your own assumption of, I'd love it if somebody masturbated to me. You know, it's like, maybe they wouldn't. So you have to kind of consider the person that you're dealing with. And that's where it comes down to not objectifying. You don't objectify the person if you're masturbating with a mental image in your head, but in reality, you know better than to actually go and lay this at their feet in real life.
I took advantage of myself in your honor last night.
Yeah. That's when you're treating the person like an object, right? Like mental images or fantasies are just that. They're fantasies. Have all the fantasies you want to have,
right?
But leave the real person out of it. Unless you have some really, really solid reason to think that they honestly want to know this, which is better than I would want to know. It would be so flattering to me, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think sexualizing people is not a problem, right? We sexualize people all the time, but you're not disrespecting that person. And you know that, like, if you met that celebrity that you're masturbating to in person,
You're not going to say.
You know to not involve them with this. And you wouldn't, and what would hold you back is your respect and regard for them as a human being and knowing that this is the real person and not the fantasy, right? The fantasy is not the person, and you're not mistreating the person in some way. You're not disrespecting their autonomy, you're not disrespecting their agency. That's when you're objectifying a person, right? And so, yeah, for me, there was a guy that was I went to the Hippie Hollow, right, which is like a nude beach, and there I was sunbathing, and when I first started going, I was nervous about going around where other people were. I was like, yeah, I'm going to find a secluded spot and just hang. Well, I learned pretty quickly that you don't want to find a secluded spot and just hang. You want to go where people are, because when you're secluded, and if somebody comes around, you're kind of out there by yourself.
Yeeks.
So I'm laying there, like, just hanging out in the sun, watching the lake, and I turn around, and there's some guy in the bushes just whacking off, watching me. And I'm like, yeah, not
Lordy.
okay. So I grab my stuff. I mean, he saw me see him. I pick up my crap, and I'm like, I'm out of here. And I leave. And, you know, I guess I didn't learn the lesson the first time, because I went and found another secluded spot. I do the same thing. And, man, he found me, like, in no time. And 30 minutes later, he's back there doing the same thing. So I grabbed my crap, and I went into the middle of a big open area where there were lots of people. And I said, this is where I'm like, in a weirdly ironic thing, being around a big crowd of strangers is safer than being by yourself here. So that to me, it's like, this guy didn't just look at me, say, wow, there's something I can masturbate to later, or let me excuse myself to the bathroom and go masturbate to this image. This was a person who involved me by very half-heartedly, quote, hiding in the bushes while he's whacking off, looking at me. Right, I'm involved in this, and he doesn't care. He didn't care, because when I was obviously freaked out and left to the area and went somewhere else, he followed me to pursue it and do it again, because his autonomy and his agency was all that mattered. What I thought about it and whether I wanted to participate or not did not matter, and potentially fed into his fantasy of maybe that's what helped turn him on.
Right.
Was knowing that he was involving a person who wasn't consenting to this.
Right. I kind of half wonder, especially since he says, where'd it go? He says that pretty much since I started masturbating, something about it felt wrong. And the whole idea of this letter, it feels to me like there are remnants of religion in there. Nobody's watching. Yeah, go on. Jim.
Yeah, I got the same impression reading that letter.
Yeah.
Is that he's got some baggage that probably came from religion.
Yeah.
And, you know, he seems kind of conflicted about, you know, the whole practice of masturbation anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought, well, that's kind of sad.
Well,
I think it's kind of warped his perception of what he's doing.
Right. Well, I mean, I was raised Catholic. There was, I understand that shame that comes around it. It's a bad thing, and getting past that, I took some years.
Yeah.
But
and even if you're not raised religious, those religious themes
definitely
sink in.
Oh, yeah.
Even to secular minds, right? And so you could have an image in your head that, if you walk in and catch your kid masturbating, that's a bad thing. I don't have kids, but I'm pretty sure that if I did and I walked in and they were masturbating, I would be like, I am so sorry I didn't knock. I will knock next time. And I would shut the door.
That's exactly right.
Hopefully they could get back in the groove. But I would just be like, my bad. My bad for barging into your
totally
room,
true.
man.
It's
You're that age.
Yep. And it goes the other way, too. If they walk in the bedroom with a locked door, unlock it,
I actually had a really interesting conversation one time, just a chat with a young Muslim guy that used to email. Oh, he used to chat me on Facebook sometimes. I don't know where he's at now, but he was kind of a young adult, and he would have arguments. He was an atheist, and he would have arguments with his Muslim family, or Muslim friends and Muslim forums. He was just very, let's go in and talk about this. And so he would address, and challenge Muslims. And he came to me one time and chatted, and he's just like, I ran into this problem. I didn't know what to say. He goes, this guy was chatting to me, and I was saying, well, there's nothing wrong with sexuality, and it's okay, and it's a normal human thing, and we shouldn't have all these taboos attached to it, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and then the guy wrote me back, and he said, so what are you going to do if you have kids one day, and then you have a 16-year-old daughter, and you catch her in her room, and she's having sex with somebody? What are you going to do? And he goes, and I didn't know what to say, because, he's like, I didn't know, how would I react to that? And I said, don't you think it's normal for a 16-year-old to want to have sex? That's a normal age where sexuality is actually becoming a thing in a pretty robust way, where people are hitting sexual maturity and starting to experiment. And, as long as she's not with her 45-year-old math teacher, it's there's, if she's with her friends, or she's experimenting, why is that a problem? Now this is a Muslim kid who's clearly still carrying some, issues. Man, he came back right away and said, wow, you are so right. Why would that be a problem? And it was just immediately he saw that. And I loved it. I was like, that is great that you just right away were like, yeah, why would I care? Why would that be wrong? If my kid was 16, 17 years old and experimenting with her friend, I found her having sex, why would that be wrong?
Yeah.
As long as she's being careful and you've raised her with information and you feel like the kid has been responsible, then what's the problem?
Yeah. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, raised Catholic, all sorts of guilt around sex and all sorts of fucked up beliefs, and then grew up and changed those beliefs and now very happily the way I am. And I've got, at this point, 13 and a 15-year-old, watching them go from infants to being sexual beings. They are both either post-pubescent or thoroughly pubescent, depending on which one you talk about. It's been a trip, and I've had to take my brain and change how I view them. They are no longer children.
Right.
They are sexual beings, and they are going to be interested in things that adults are interested in, and I have to reframe them. There's nothing judgmental. Yeah. It's just you have to change how you think about it.
Yeah, and you can't treat it like your parents treated it.
Oh God, no!
You have to look at this and say, I don't have a model, right?
No,
I don't have a model for what to do with this. I know what I want to accomplish, and I know what my parents did is the wrong way to go, but how do I address and open, because you don't have that experience where you had that adult that was there for you and you felt you could come and talk to. And so you don't even know, I have a friend, I have more than one friend actually. I have many friends who've raised their children in an open environment where they're just I want my kid to, one of my friends when we talked about, for example, banning books or books that were inappropriate. And I was just I don't think there is such a thing as an inappropriate book. Now, if I was taking my kids to the library every day and they were 10 years old and they started prolifically reading, serial killing books and we're super into it, we might sit down and have a talk. It might be the kid might grow up to be a great forensic scientist one day. You know what I mean? It's you have to just know what's going on with your kid. If they get into a dark space, you just want to kind of nudge it and say, well, can we talk about this? What's the motive here and what's going on? But even being that open, there are still things the kids won't tell them. right? There are times when they discover a thing and the kid didn't talk to them, and they actually were like, I would be okay with this, and I don't know why my kid wasn't comfortable coming to talk to me, right? Like, so it might be that you find a hidden stash of drugs, or it could be that you find some sexting on the phone, or you know, and it's like there's all these in one case it was actually pretty severe. It was one little girl was being subjected to some sexual harassment by an older male relative, and the mom got concerned, didn't know how deep it went. Was it just harassment? Was there any assault? But she didn't find out until she got called in to a school counselor to say, hey, do you understand what's going on? And she was just like, no, I have not heard any of this. And to her, it was just like, why wouldn't my kid come talk to me about this, right? She was very grateful that there was someone her kid could go talk to.
Yeah.
But even the best parents, who are the most open and the most, desirous to have that kind of open communication, are going to still have situations where they're going to have to realize, for some reason, my kid doesn't feel comfortable coming to mom or dad about this, right? That it's just not a mom or dad thing for whatever reason.
Right.
And it's not a reflection on, you being a horrible, unapproachable parent.
Yeah. No, right.
And only the kid can speak to what makes them comfortable or not. But the fact is, creating that situation where you can make it as open as you can for your part is just something that people have to navigate in many times without ever having that experience and being on the other side of it. It's hard when you're not ever the child on the end of it, because you're thinking to yourself, how would I have reacted to this, or what would I have liked my parents to have done? And it's all a big hypothetical.
Exactly there.
Yeah.
Right. Because when I became a parent, I knew that I didn't want to do it like my parents had done. But there's the thing. What do you actually want to do?
Right.
And you have to fill in that gap. And I've been extraordinarily fortunate in that I have friends who are parenting coaches and experts in these sorts of things. And I have gone to them more times than I can count. And pretty much across the board, what they tell me to do is exactly the opposite of what my parents did.
Yeah.
So I've kind of come to to think, okay, what is the opposite of how I would have been raised? And I will do that. So, I have been extraordinarily open about sexuality in all terms and that sort of thing, to the point that when my kids came to me and said, what's this whole, what's that crazy game, Cards Against Humanity thing? If you've ever played it, it is not G-rated.
Okay.
And they said, what is this thing? And because they could hear friends who had come over to our house, adult friends, playing the game, laughing uproariously, just like,
this sounds like
hyenas,
fun.
Right? Yeah. And of course, they have the internet, so they Google it, and they're like, oh, what's this? And they're like, we want to play it. And I said, okay. And so every card that came up that said, something, what do you do when an elephant wants to give you a blowjob or whatever? And they'd be like, what's a blowjob? And I just define it. And there were other adults there, that, and because, these are my kids and the adults here and whatever. And they'd be like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah. And so my kids, there is no mystery. They, at least, I feel like I've done a fairly good job of that. And if anything ever comes up, they ask. And the other thing that I can only hope is what you said, Tracie, is that if they don't ever feel comfortable coming to me, that they have someone else they can.
Yeah, like a teacher or counselor or somebody. Yeah.
I don't want them to feel like they can't find a solution somehow. I want them to feel empowered in some way. So, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
It's been a journey.
And I mean, to me, with the books, it's always been a matter of the kid's either going to understand that the kid either already understands the concept, in which case, what are you protecting them from? Or they don't understand the concept, in which case they're going to have to look it up. And if it's too complicated or too out of their experience range, they're not going to grasp it, and it's not going to be interesting to them.
Wouldn't you rather the explanation come from you than their peers or the internet, God forbid?
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, though, is they'll either understand what they're reading or they're not going to understand what they're reading. If they don't understand what they're reading, they're going to make an effort to understand it if they really want to. And then if it's too far out of range for them, they're not going to be able to understand it. Even when they're getting an explanation, it's not going to really fit into their situation. So they're either going to get it or they're not going to get it. If they get it, then they haven't been exposed to anything they're not, and if they can understand it, then it's nothing they're not, it's not inappropriate for their age.
Right. Yeah, true enough. If they can ask about it, then they need an answer.
I'm sorry, Jen. Yeah, you
go,
were gonna say
Jen.
No, I was just going to relate kind of a funny story of kids. Usually, my son's, classmates throughout the years who've approached me and said, "Hey, how'd you get a kid without, a daddy?"
Well,
have they never heard of storks?
And so, depending on the age of the kid and how well you know their parents, you have to craft an age-appropriate response to this. And the funniest one was a kid that was he was the older brother of one of my son's soccer teammates, and he had approached me with that question about, hey, how'd you get, and he obviously knew something about sex and reproduction because he was fairly specific about, how'd you make a baby without, a dad? How could two women make a baby? And so I had to explain to him that, you go to a special doctor and they, have ways of helping you get pregnant. And he still was very perplexed. And so I talked to his mom afterwards, and I'm like, he asked me this question, so that's what I told him. I said, I didn't know if you wanted, sperm donor to be in your son's vocabulary at 9 years old, but, And she's like, I am so surprised he asked you that question. And she goes, yeah, my cousin's gay, and she and her partner have a child, and you know how that's done.
Yeah.
So it turns out it was perfectly fine. I think his actual curiosity was, did we use the same process?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, he was 9 and he didn't ask it in that explicit way. But
Right.
Yeah,
I would be afraid the kid could come away from what you said with thinking that there's a special kind of doctor that women go to. I'm like, whoa.
Dr. Love.
Dr. Love. And actually, my OBGYN's name was Dr. Love.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, I've actually used that sort of little dodge for, very young children who wouldn't understand the whole, donor insemination thing anyway.
Yeah.
Because they have no concept of how that all happens.
Mm-hmm.
My son has known about this for a long time.
Sure.
And so he probably has a more comprehensive understanding of this than most kids his age. But there's no benefit to the kid going into puberty ignorant about anything to do with sex and reproduction.
If you can see your pets doing it, then you should understand what's going on.
Yeah,
It's just
and
life.
I mean,
it's just part of living. It's one of the natural drives, and I at this point in my life, I don't see why. And this sounds overly simplified, but I don't see why there should be any problem whatsoever. There's food, sleep, and sex.
I have a segue.
Yes, ma'am.
But I want to check with Jen first, because did you have something to add?
Oh no, I'm
okay.
Good. Go ahead.
Talking about the sexual taboos, social sexual taboos, and issues that come up from that, I found a new crime, and it was called sextortion.
Oh yeah,
and it's like where a lot of times there will be people who do the whatever that was, like when they do the revenge porn or whatever, and they'll post like their partners, either sexy pictures of their partners that were taken to be intimate and personal, and they'll put them out publicly like as punishment for someone breaking up or any other reason, and it's completely reprehensible. And now there's something called sextortion. Apparently these gangs are targeting men, and they bait them with like the pretty girl account. And the guys come in and they end up doing all kinds of things on video. And then they find out that, oh, it's this group of people that actually has my video now of me doing all my sexy stuff. And they're going to send it to my family and my friends. And so they demand money to not do this. And when I read this, And when I read things like with the revenge porn, first of all, there's a concept of like society as it is and society as it should be. And we can't have a Pollyanna attitude about if society were what it should be, then. So in the society as it is, both these things are reprehensible things to do to a person. Mm-hmm. In the society as it should be, these crimes would have no teeth.
Right.
In a society as it should be, where nobody thinks twice about sex, it would just be like, giggle, giggle, Jim, why did I get a video of you like whacking off?
Right.
Right. Or, grandson.
Yeah, right.
What are you thinking? Uh-huh. Or even with your job, it would be like someone sending your boss, you having a hot dog at a picnic. Right. If we really had an attitude of like sex is not a big deal and so what, and it wasn't this shameful, horrifying, humiliating, awful thing to be seen naked or to be caught in the act of sex. Like I said, I walk into the bedroom, you're masturbating. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. It's a private
instead
thing,
of
but
what
it's not...
the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, you're being normal, and please don't you be embarrassed. I should be embarrassed that I didn't knock. Right? And when something like this happens to a person, if that video goes out or if those photos go out, other people should just be like, what the hell? Who's the asshole that's like posting this video or posting this photo? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm sorry, Jane or Jim or, Pat or whoever. This should never have happened to you, but that person's a jerk, and don't be embarrassed because you're just doing what we all do. It just went out publicly is all. Mm-hmm. Don't sweat it. Yeah. That should be our reaction to a crime like that as a society, which would really help reduce the impact of these crimes if people really didn't care.
Yeah. I think that you're right. I think of sex and that sort of thing as being private unless you want it to not be private.
Correct.
And so, like you said, I would want to talk about how reprehensible the person was who tried to do this to you.
Right.
But it would never cross my mind to be judgmental of the person who is actually being blackmailed.
But I mean, it's that judgment that makes those people feel. Right. I mean, yes, there's a violation of some jerk releasing this when they knew that this was not the intention of it, and they knew you didn't consent. And it's like I was talking about involving you, and your agency doesn't matter. It's like they're not respecting you; they're objectifying you. This is the root of every evil, right? Is objectifying other people and not respecting them as human agents and regarding their consent. And so that is a violation in itself. But the larger impact, the reason the person is posting it publicly is in order to humiliate you in a broad way. Yeah. Because they are relying on the societal judgment. And the way that these gangs work with luring these guys in and exposing those videos is the same thing, right? Like they're basically relying on your fear of exposure of something that's not even illegal. It's just a little embarrassing, It's like, it's not like I want people to see a video of me masturbating, but if I knew that people were just like, oh, this is something that happens that people do that's like a criminal thing and whatever, it's like, yeah, send the video. And then if I can track you down, I'm going to file charges. Yeah. So, but nobody should feel like I have to pay you because the judgment against me is going to be so severe socially or so costly socially that I cannot afford to let this get out for something as benign as this.
Right. Yeah.
That really is just annoying.
Jen, did you have any thoughts?
Oh, no, I was just laughing because I actually got an email from one of these extortionists.
Wow.
Saying, yeah. So
this is your friend masturbating on video.
No. They were actually trying to extort me, saying, "Oh, hey, it's not like we think there's, I think there's anything wrong with this or anything like that, but your computer camera can be hacked, which is true, and we captured you doing something." And,
wow.
Again, we don't think there's anything wrong with this, but, it'd be pretty embarrassing if your relatives found out or, your employer found out or something like that. But you know what? If you can pay us $350, we can make this go away.
Oh, Lordy.
I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, dude, the joke's on you. Because first of all, I don't have a working camera on any of my computers because the first thing... Either I order it without a camera or the first thing I do is disable the camera. So you literally cannot hack my camera.
Mm-hmm.
And second, I never masturbate in front of my computer, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Right.
Like, no, I'm not paying you shit.
Yeah. And see, here's the other thing that's kind of almost a little offensive. It's only worth $350. Come on.
I kind of chuckled, but
$350 is really low. Must not have been too hot.
Yeah. There are. I mean, a lot of people are going to be masturbating in front of a computer, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where a lot of people watch porn. So it's really funny. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would think if you get such an email, such as Jen's, and you are concerned, I recommend that you respond with the word proof ?
Mm-hmm.
And then wait for the link to the video. Because if there isn't one, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. And if there is one, don't worry about it. Just warn your friends and family. Hey,
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Hey, you might be getting some juicy video of me. Just letting you know.
Oops. Sorry.
It's kind of a cute tone.
Sorry. We are going to keep going, though, because it is, we started late. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I actually.
Oh, go ahead, Jen. I got something. You got something.
I got to drop off.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
All right.
I have some good news, though. I mean,
I was going to say, if we had a segment, were we saying goodbye to Jen then? Is you dropping off now?
Yeah, I gotta get going here. I've got a lot of stuff I got to do this weekend. So.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling in, and we'll carry on without you, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. Good talking to you.
All right. Bye, Jen.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Go ahead. What do you got?
Okay, so after all of these really difficult and often heartrending topics, I have a happy one.
Okay.
Well, I like going in a good direction. Here in Austin, we have streets, or we did anyway, called things like Robert E. Lee Street and Jeff Davis Road, and they've been vandalized for some time, which vandalism is, not okay, but in this case, I'm just not terribly against it. But so the Austin City Council recently voted to change the names of these two streets. And I understand there are more, but I don't have the information on what
those
they
were
are.
the two big ones.
Those are the two biggies. And who they're changing them to is awesome. I was really afraid that they were going to choose two more famous white men.
Rick Perry Road.
Yeah, lordy. Oh my gosh. But they didn't. They renamed Robert E. Lee Road to be Azzie Morton Road, which is awesome. She was born in Lockhart, Texas, and she's the only African American woman to serve as the U.S. Treasurer. She served under Jimmy Carter, and she lived from 1936 to 2003. So, and she did a bunch of other things. She was an educator, and I had the article, but my computer just died. And so, yay for progress. And then the other one is Jeff Davis Road, which is near me. And the reason I knew it had changed is because my husband texted me and said, they changed the name.
Well, we passed that road on the way here.
Right.
Yeah.
And they changed it to William Holland, who was actually born into slavery in 1840. And, oh, golly, he had a big, long thing. I better see if I can get this up on my thing here, because there's some important stuff here. Hang on.
I'm kind of curious, when they change a road name, just in general, like, does everybody then have to update their address everywhere?
I when I was Googling it, I put in the new name, William Holland Avenue, and all that came up were MLS listings for that street now. It's been totally renamed, and Zillow, everything was
Well,
William
I guess
Holland.
what I'm saying is, it's like, if I live on that street, my driver's license, I have to go get a new driver's license, or do I have to go get, I would assume that the municipal utility companies would be automatically alerted of a city street.
Do they replace your license without charging you a fee?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think they would have to.
Yeah, but anyhow,
I
that's a
hope.
good question. Good question. So let's see. Born into slavery in 1840, after his father, a white man, purchased his freedom, Holland fought in the Union Army and later taught in Travis County schools. He served as Texas State Representative, County Commissioner, and played a crucial role in establishing the Deaf, Dumb, and Blind Institute for Colored Youth in 1887, located on Bull Creek Road between 38th and 45th Streets. He later served as the Institute's superintendent. So just all sorts of marvelous. I am thrilled that they chose such important people. And in your face, Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah. I've heard there are other names that need to go, too. I can't wait till they go.
Yeah, in fact, I saw one of the women who lived on, I think it was Jeff Davis, and she was saying that she has little children, and she's like, they're going to reach an age where they start asking about the name of the street, and I don't want to have to tell them that it's, somebody who fought for slavery and that led the rebellion, basically, as the president of the new slave state.
Yay. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yep. Celebrating such things. So there's some happy stuff.
That is. I've got one, and it's funny because you're talking about like the happy news, and I was thinking when I saw this, I was like, this would be a positive thing.
Yay.
I was thinking if we had a segment called Good News, Bad News, this would be perfect.
Okay.
So the good news is that the Republic of Ireland has voted overwhelmingly to overturn the abortion ban by 66.4 to 33.6%. So it's a pretty overwhelming vote,
Yes.
right? A lot of
Very.
support,
That's huge.
anti-Catholic vote, and pro, one small step toward equality for women there. Now, I do want to say it's not exactly unrestricted abortion access, right? It's still very restrictive, but it's a little bit less restrictive than it was before. And I think right now it's like up to 12 weeks. You can go and have an abortion. And so that was like to know that was, going on in Ireland was such a wow thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I look at it and it's like, well, maybe I'll be moving to Ireland one day. You know what I mean? It's like, go to Ireland, get away from the U.S. because what's happening here
is the opposite.
Yeah, is the bad news. So
Yeah.
basically, Arkansas is now the first state to ban medical abortions. So making abortion less safe for women is their goal. And what they are describing is they used a tactic, which is you say that an abortion provider has to have admitting privileges at a hospital in order to administer the abortion medication. So they can't give you the medicine unless they have admitting privileges at the hospital, which is ironic because the medication, the medical abortion is less dangerous. And I don't want to imply that abortion is a dangerous procedure because, frankly, if you look up the complication rates, there are other routine surgeries that have higher complication rates than an abortion. So it's actually a very safe procedure overall. But the medical abortion is one of the safest forms for women, and it's usually a very early an abortion form that would be used early in a pregnancy. So it's safe, it's early, it's effective. And they want to not allow it, right? So that they want women to have an actual medical procedure in order to have an abortion in Arkansas. And so they require the admitting privileges at the hospitals. But, I mean, I think we all know why they don't perform abortions in a hospital. Because of the stigma that is attached to this.
Yeah, a lot of them are religious as well.
You have religious hospitals, but you also have the reality that they know what's going to happen if they start to offer abortion at their hospital. I mean, I had an abortion clinic down the road from me, or a clinic, it wasn't, I don't know if it's Planned Parenthood, but I had a clinic down the road where they did offer abortion services, and that place was being, picketed, and I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I know in front of the building I saw things that would happen, but at their offices, I don't know what kind of threats they were getting or what, you know what I mean? And a hospital doesn't need this, doesn't want it. So you say to the abortion provider or to the reproductive medical provider, in order to perform abortions with this medication, you have to have admitting privileges at a hospital, and then you make sure that the hospitals understand socially what is going to happen to them if they give admitting privileges to anybody at this facility. So they had one case where somebody went around to like several different hospitals seeking admitting privileges, and they were told no. These hospitals don't want anything to do with this. They don't want to be tied to it. They don't want to be involved in it. They don't need that headache. Like, why would a hospital do that? Because it's just going to be a headache for them. And it's not even a necessary thing, but when they make it legally required, then they can't do it. And so this is a method of telling somebody, you have a right to do this, but we're going to remove the capacity. So we're going
You have to be literate.
Yeah, we're going to make it practically impossible and I mean that like from a practical standpoint, we're going to make this impossible for you. We're going to make it very difficult, very restricted, very hard to get access to, very hard to, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to, there's all these things that we're going to make sure are steps in your waiting periods and all of that. And so we're going to make all these roadblocks to you exercising this right. But we're not taking your right away. Like, you still have a right. And that's a bunch of crap.
It totally is.
This is not about, you can't strip somebody of the capacity to practice, to exercise a right, and then say that, hey, but I didn't strip your right. Because you did. Effectively, you did.
I can't think of any other issue that is this contentious that is so restrictively regulated. I can't think of another one, really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any other medical procedure where our Congress is so concerned and involved.
Yeah,
like
not just medical stuff, but other things where people are up in arms, so to speak. Yeah, and the statistic for, I think, fatalities for medical abortion is like 0.00073. That's a statistic that I think I heard just last night on the show called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. He did a segment. I recommend that you, if you don't know what trap laws are, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
He explains it brilliantly, and the way they make it so difficult. There are many ways. It's not just that you have to have the admitting privileges. If you do have a clinic, it has to meet hospital-like requirements. So he was talking about how you have to have hallways that are 8 feet wide. And that's so you can get 2 gurneys past each other in a hallway. And you don't need that in an abortion clinic. But something like that can shut a clinic down.
Right, they know it.
They're doing. And then, the 3-day waiting period. Okay, so what if I have to travel to, I don't know, Dallas, Fort Worth?
Some of these clinics are 100 miles away.
Oh, more
and,
than.
and it'll be like you have to, you go and you have the consultation, and then 3 days later, you have to come back, or you're going to have to stay and miss work for 3 days. It's like, this is restrictive, and there's no reason for it.
And what if you don't have the car or the money or the whatever?
Yeah.
And I feel fairly certain that there's an attitude that if you can't afford these things, then you can't afford having a child, and therefore you shouldn't be having sex. Like, these things are somehow connected, and it's spectacularly wrongheaded. You've talked a lot about it, Tracie.
And the lie is we're doing this to make women safe, and no, it's not.
No.
Make it safer for people who are going to have an abortion. No, it's not.
We're going to make you pay.
It's to limit access to the point that a person can't actually exercise a right, because you can't make it illegal, and so you're going to make it impossible instead.
It's to make you pay for your transgressions.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Ugh. Yeah.
Hey, where are we?
Oh, back on Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, here's some other happy stuff that's around that.
Good.
He won the Amnesty International's highest award in 2018.
Very cool.
That's amazing. An international, extremely well-respected organization. He was given the Ambassador of Conscience Award. Love it. That is perfect. Yeah. So that's some happy right there for you. Thank you.
It is happy. There's so much, it's so frustrating to see, what's going on there with him and with the NFL and with the fans, and I just...
Yeah.
It must be really frustrating to have franchises that have so many black players who understand that their fans are so okay with Black Lives Don't Matter.
Yeah.
Like, we don't care if people that look like you are dying in the streets, but we just want you to play football for us and entertain us, and then just keep your mouth shut about, you're getting well paid, so why do you care?
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's disturbing. It's disturbing to have to entertain people that have so much disdain for people that look like you. That if you didn't make the money you make and have the athletic prowess that you have, these people wouldn't care if you were shot to death by a cop in the street illegally.
Yeah.
That's your, quote, fan.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. I don't understand the whole fan
Can
thing
you imagine
anyway.
performing and knowing that that's your crowd?
No, I can't.
I feel for them. I really feel for them. And
Yeah.
and that's saying a lot because, no matter what color you are, when someone's pulling in that kind of bucks, it's hard to actually say like, oh, I really feel sorry for this. But I do. I mean, I think that's a crappy
absolutely.
situation for a person to be in. I don't care how much money you're making.
Yeah.
When you know that, somebody's basically telling you, you just get out there and entertain those racists and you don't have to, and just keep your mouth shut about your racist
Just
issues.
so ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. No, it's frustrating. I get angers. I get angers.
I get the angers. Some people have the feels. We get the angers.
Yeah, I get the angers all the time. It's like my first response.
Yeah.
To everything.
Somewhat related and somewhat all about me, but with the post-concussion syndrome, one of the things that I haven't been able to do a whole lot of is highly emotional things that are what people might consider upsetting. Those sorts of things really light a brain up. And so Facebook has been a very scary thing for me lately.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I have...
If my feed especially.
Well, no.
Sends you fetal.
But, yeah, right? But here's one of the things that has saved me. Again, Callie Wright, I love you so much. Listening to her podcast has helped a lot because no matter what she talks about, it winds up being, in some sense, let's move forward, let's have some progress, let's talk about what we can do sort of thing, which I really appreciate. And then I listened to one of her podcasts. It was a recent one about social media use and how you can control it more. And Eli Bosnick was on it, and then, of course, Ari Stillman and Callie, and they talked about what they recommended. And start clicking on kittens. Okay. And hide things, anything that has to do with stuff you can't deal with right now.
Okay.
And, I mean, at the beginning of the whole change of the administration, I was extraordinarily active and did a lot of stuff, so I can't feel too bad about not doing anything lately. But my feed has changed, I'll tell you, and it makes a difference. Your brain really does have to work hard with that stuff. So let me just tell you, if you're a little tired of it, give yourself a break. It's hard stuff to deal with. It really is, even more than you may be aware of.
I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to unplug a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's been a good thing, and I've got lots of kittens in my feed now, which is nice. Kittens and dogs and horses and all the happy things. But I do see some stuff enough to know what we're talking about today. It still comes through. You can't really escape it. And if I see one more post about Ambien, I think I'm gonna put my fist through my computer. It's like, oh gosh.
I saw a really cute one though, where somebody had posted it, and it basically said something like, I don't know that it was like for real or if it was just a mock-up. It was probably, I'm guessing it was a joke, but maybe the people that make Ambien have a good sense of humor or something, and it actually got fed. I don't have a clue, but it was like a statement that was supposed to be like a tweet from the company that makes Ambien saying. That it's not it was in more official language, but it was just like, it's not a known side effect of Ambien to become racist. And I'm like,
that was pretty brilliant.
It was cute.
That was good. I like that one. That's the only one I liked. The rest you can keep. Oof. Yeah. Well, let's see what else we got. Looking through my list. I had another thing that I didn't. Anything, Tracie?
Well, I'm kind of going through my feed here. Let's see. And one of the things... Oh, I didn't want to probably... Some of the stuff, it's like, ooh, that set fire to a few things. Well, the U.S. blocked a UN motion calling for investigation into the killings of the Gaza protesters. So how about that?
Yeah.
And then there was like a related issue that I posted where it talked about the percentage. Here it is. Half of evangelicals, and I'm surprised it's only half. I would give half of evangelicals support Israel because they believe it's important for the fulfilling of end times prophecy.
Yeah.
So those sorts of things.
That's been known for a long time. Yeah, when things like that happen, the U.S. blocking such a huge and obviously wrong thing, it's so surreal.
It is.
It is so surreal, and that's the thing that gets to me about everything lately in the news feed that's been calmed a little bit in my world is how surreal it all is.
Yeah.
And people will say, I can't believe this is happening, and I think, I totally saw it coming.
To me, it was such a weird juxtaposition to see the speech that was being made, like that Jared Kushner was reading this speech about what a great day it was and how this was such a great promotion of, peace and like this whole, and then talking about like, and these people that are outside the walls and they're the problem. And in the meantime, you're seeing these images of the people outside the walls and they're throwing rocks and then being gunned down.
Right.
And I I'm looking at that and I'm like, this is a representative from my country talking about what a great day this is. And everybody, when we said we were going to move that embassy, every president had waved it, and we've got one now that said, let's do
this. Yeah.
And everyone said, this is going to be a bad idea. At the very time when this was announced, I posted and I said, in my head, I don't see how this isn't going to be detrimental to the peace process, to a two-state solution. This is going to be detrimental. This is going to be violent explosion. And the only thing I could say was, I hope I'm wrong. Like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that when this happens, it's not the nightmare that I'm envisioning. And it was totally what everybody saw coming. And it played out exactly the same way. We knew this would occur. Everybody said this would occur. We were warned that this would occur, and it occurred. And then you've got a U.S. rep up there basically saying, it's not our fault.
I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like this move was orchestrated to help feed the narrative that brown people are dangerous.
Like in Palestine?
Yeah, Palestinians.
Oh, I think this was purely about making evangelicals happy. I just think this was about, they want it. I mean, he's got some people whispering in his ear.
I know. I know it has to do with the evangelicals and the second coming and all that.
Because I don't think he cares. Like, I don't think it matters to him that people died. I don't think it matters where the embassy is located. I don't think he gives a crap. I just think this is one more thing that he could do to piss people off, to cause contention, to.
But if you have the people that are already being viewed by a large, well, I don't know if it's a large, but it's a vociferous group of people who think that brown people by and large are just a pain in the ass and they're always complaining and they're going to protest and and then it happens again, brought on by something that's completely wrong. And I wonder if most of his supporters would not appreciate why such a move would be problematic, because they don't really understand.
I think it's really hard for me to believe that anybody didn't understand, because there was so much communication about why this was going to result in violence.
Oh, I don't mean people in the administration per se. I mean Joe and Jane Schlunk, who are...
I just don't know if this was that hard, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got these two groups fighting for this property.
It's also not hard to see that the world is a different place if you're trans or black or whatever, but they don't see that. So,
we sent pastors over there who have a history of saying horrendously anti-Semitic stuff that were there for the ceremony, and that's the thing too. It's like, I think that. For Israel's part, at least the leadership, I don't think they care. I think they could have had, neo-Nazis getting up there and basically making speeches saying how horrible Jews were. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as they got that embassy moved, they'd be smiling all the way. I just don't imagine that they care as long as they're getting what they want. Mm. And it's just my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, other people can have other views of it. And I'm not saying that I speak for everybody that's living in Israel, but I definitely think the leadership is past the point of really giving a crap what anybody personally thinks of them. Mm-hmm. I think it's about what I get.
I'm thinking more about people like Trump rallying up even more fervency in his supporters. Like just one more
Yeah,
brick in the wall of narrative that says that people who are not...
Okay, well, I mean, he's a POTUS that gets thank you cards from David Duke and Richard Spencer, right?
Exactly.
All right, so this is the guy who makes happy the racists.
Right.
And this happens routinely. And I think that there's probably no doubt that when you take guns and torches and march up and down the streets saying basically that you're going to make the streets free from non-whites and that you're going to take it all back, which means taking from, and you're marching and doing that. This is provocative. This is intended to provoke, right? This is not non-threatening. It may not be the direct threat that is required by law, but like we were talking about before, when you have a history of oppression and genocide and slavery and lynchings, and you have a group that's marching and they're armed and they're and those were big torches. This wasn't a candlelight vigil, right? Like that was a torch. I was like, this is wild to see people carrying these giant flames and guns on their side, and they're marching down the street at night and they're chanting and shouting about, basically remarginalizing Jews and blacks in the society. And this is intended to evoke, right? This is an intentional provocation. I think that, in a weird way, what you're probably describing is, to them, if there had been like a group of Jews or blacks that had gone out and gotten violent with them, they would have seen that as a win. Like, oh, we got them to show their colors, right?
That's what I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah, I don't know that the move to Jerusalem was intended to do that. I think that there was no doubt that it would do it. That it would. I mean, how could you not see this coming?
Well, like a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to do that. Yeah. And I think they were already prepared to say, it had nothing to do with us. And I don't know why moving the embassy would have ever, triggered something like this. I don't know.
And it takes the same sort of blindness that can't see racism.
But is it a can't see, or is it just I don't care? I don't care. And when the shit hits the fan, I'm just going to say it's not my fault.
I think it's a combination. I really do think that it is a choice, but they won't see it for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that's another thing. When you've got Palestine, you're dealing with people who have nothing left to lose. Right. And you have disenfranchised this group to the point where, like, Jen was talking, it's amazing that they haven't just set fire to everything at this point. Because I don't know, I don't know how much you can expect people to take, how much shit you can shovel down a person's throat and expect them to just keep swallowing. At a certain point, you're going to get backlash, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to probably include a lot of violence. And that's what happens when your society puts people into a pressure cooker and closes the lid and says, we're not going to pay attention to you. It's going to explode.
Yeah. Oh, God, we need another happy to end on. What can we have this happy?
Lieutenant Governor in Texas blames abortions in video games for the Santa Fe school shooting.
That's just funny.
It's not happy, but it's
ridiculous.
It's like this is a ridiculous note where this is Texas politicians.
Yes, it's absolutely ridiculous. Here's something that's kind of happy. Tomorrow morning on Atheist Roundtable, the discussion topic is going to be how human beings are moral without religion. And David Oliverio is the host, and he invited me because I'm a biologist, and he wanted to get the evolutionary perspective on it, and I'm very excited about talking about this because this is one of my
strength of the wolf is the pack.
Yeah. So that's happy.
That is happy.
Listen tomorrow, or watch, actually. It's an actual video show that we'll be talking about morals and how we are moral without any sort of religion.
And I think that's, I'm going to just reach, right? But I mean, most of the people that have talked to me that liked Godless Bitches that wanted to come back, I would say have a moral motivation to some degree. They like being informed about what's happening, and they like understanding these issues a little bit more, hearing some discussion. And I'm sure it's frustrating when I say something that's wrong, or when I say something that's, like ignorant, like I'm not aware of something and I make a comment where people are just like, but in general, just hearing these issues coming up, being made aware of them and saying like, okay, this is going on, or this is, different people's perspectives on this. And I think the overall goal for most of the people that listen in is that awareness. Like, I want to be more aware. And part of becoming more aware of things is a change in the individual perspective, which is that I need to be more sensitive to this. This is what I can do in my personal sphere to not make this worse or to participate in supporting something. And even though I think a lot of the discussion does gear toward negative, frustrating things, part of it is when you become aware of what's going on, then you can address it in a different way, and you can go forward in a more informed way. And if they hear something that I'm saying and they think, or that any of us are saying, and they get frustrated by it, or they think it sounds ridiculous, or they can look into it more and see for themselves, like, what do you think about it? I'm not telling people what to think here. I'm telling people what I think.
I hope people listen carefully. I don't want, just because there was that, was it Salon or the article about why Barr's comments and B's comments were not equivalent, and on and on and on. And I feel fairly certain that a lot of people read that with an agenda to justify B not being fired and Barr being fired. While the overall conclusion in my book is still that, yes, that's a fair and justified thing. I didn't go into the article thinking that I was going to be justified, because it's a tricky issue. And so I hope that people listening to the show, hearing your perspective, Jen's, maybe mine, fill in a little more gaps and think carefully about it. Don't just assume that you have a...
Like, I had my own reactions to it, It's like, at first I didn't think much about it, and then as I started to hear more about it, I became more curious, like, what exactly did she say? I go look up what she said, and I'm just like, I'm not down with that at all.
Right.
And then there was the question of the firing and blah, blah. And so what was kind of cool about it is that there have been a lot of panels. So I've had the benefit of seeing multiple people talking about this and talking together and bouncing ideas off each other. I agree with you on this. I don't agree with you on this.
Right.
And so there is a real benefit. Some of the points that people raised, I was like, well, that's something I hadn't thought of. That's a perspective on it that maybe I should have considered, or maybe I need to look at it that way. I think somebody raised it was literally a panel that I watched where they raised the issue of, is this a one-time thing from a person who's not normally saying this versus somebody who's always saying this? And somebody else was like, well, this was on Twitter, but these are things that I was just like, well, I hadn't really thought of that, but this is this is a distinction with a difference, right? Or a difference with a distinction, or however that's phrased.
Right.
It's not just minor. Like, these things make a difference, and they do play into how these get evaluated.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to just come at it and be like, these are equivalent, these are wrong, it's just all wrong.
Right.
It's like, no, there are similarities and there are differences. And at the end of the day, whether or not a person gets fired is going to be up to their employer. But you have this social backlash that is happening with all three of them, right? Kaepernick and B and Barr, where when that employer makes that decision, people have a right to respond to it. It's not about free speech. It's about what the employer chooses to get behind.
Yep.
In Kaepernick's case, we're going to get behind the racists. In Barr's case, we're not going to get behind the racists.
Yeah, and if I'm going to respond, I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
And in the case of B, it was more subtle. It was like, we made a mistake. We didn't read this right. We didn't read the social response correctly. We didn't read the interpretation of how this would be taken correctly. And we did upset some fans, and we understand why. And so we're going to acknowledge that it was wrong. We're not going to get behind doing this ever again. We're not going to defend it. We are going to proceed from here, and this is all we're going to do about it. So there's like variation in how you can respond to these things, and I get it. There's nuance. It's not black and white. Yeah. But sometimes it kind of is. Like, I understand the pressure on the NFL, but there's a question of how much loss are you willing to take before you say, I'm going to appease racism.
Doing the right thing.
Yeah, and that's totally up to them. They have to live with it, and I feel bad that the players have to live with that, because, throwing away a career is a huge decision, especially when it's something you've worked that hard for and where you're earning, that kind of money and where you have that kind of position. And I would definitely not blame a player for saying, I'm not willing to throw this in the garbage over this decision.
Right.
But at the same time, what a crappy thing for your employer. And maybe, I don't know if it's the employer, it's the NFL. They're not really employing the players. It's like the association, I guess, of owners or whatever. And some of the owners are more, like there was one owner, I think it was the Jets, said they would pay the fines.
Right.
You go ahead and kneel, we'll pay the fines.
Yeah.
And
It's a beautiful thing.
so it's not when you're talking about the NFL, it's a group of employers really, and they're not all equivalent, and they're not all on board with the decision, and they weren't all, despite the fact the NFL was saying that everybody was consulted, it doesn't seem like they were.
Yeah, it almost feels, it just had this thought, like gladiators. You go down there and just give your life. We hate you, and you're just there for our entertainment, but you actually personally don't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
It feels like that.
Yeah, we don't really care if you're, if you see an oppressed demographic that is part of you. We just don't want to know. We don't care about you. Like you say, we don't care about you as a person. We don't care about people that look like you. We just care about what you can do on a field.
Carry that ball.
Yeah.
And get it where it's supposed to go, so that I can jump up and down and say, we won.
That is a great example of objectification.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, God.
The thing is, you can care about somebody doing the job that they're paid to do and still recognize their humanity. You can say, the thing I like the best about Kaepernick is his athletic ability and his prowess on the field. That's why I tune in. And still say, and you know what? If he wants to kneel, good for him.
Right.
Because that's a human thing. That's a human part of him that the fans are rejecting. That's a human part of these players that these fans are basically saying you have no right to.
Right. Or I disagree with it, but you do you.
Yeah.
I mean, even it's still he's still a person, even if you disagree with it. I think you're ignoring an important thing, obviously. Right. But to say you can't is a different level.
Yeah, I support you as an athlete, but I don't support you as a human being.
Right. Right.
And it's like, why can't you do both?
Right.
Why can't you say I support you as an athlete and a human being?
You're a person with your own stuff.
And that kind of is weird to me when people say, well, when somebody does a job, that's objectification. And it's like, only if you think people who do jobs aren't people.
Right? What the hell is up with that?
I mean, if I hire a plumber, he's there to unclog my sink. But you know what? If he calls and says he can't make it today because his baby's in the hospital, then I'm cool with that. Right? I'm not going to be like, wait a minute, you're the thing that unclogs my sink, and you have no right to go to the hospital with your sick child. You have a sink to unclog, buddy.
Yeah.
No, that's a human being, and I get it.
Right.
I know that it's a human being who is coming to unclog my sink, and I respect the fact that that's a human being.
Right.
I don't have to ask him about his family. I don't have to care about all his personal crap that's going on with him. But when that comes up, I shouldn't be like, no, your only existence is to unclog a sink. I'm aware that there's a person.
Right. Right on. Okay. Are we, what time is it? Are we doing, we have gone past our time.
Okay, I was going to say, it's been a long haul.
It has been, but it's been a good one. It's been a really great show. I've so enjoyed this. Thank you, Jen, if you're still listening out there somehow. And thank you, Tracie.
Sure thing.
As always, so wonderful to hear your thoughts on things. Thank you to the crew, Mark and Vern, who are in the other room doing what they do, all the hard work to make this podcast.
The voodoo that they do so well.
Yeah, right? And every production of the Atheist Community of Austin actually happened because of these guys. So we don't need a savior. We have each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need.
Yeah.